Thank you, brother. Thank you, Dan the Man, and thanks for being my friend, and thanks for being a fan of the program. Rome had its gladiators. The Aztecs had their epic human sacrifices. The Mayans cut out people's hearts on the top of temples. But in all the annals of bloody spectacle, nothing has drawn a crowd like America's biggest annual cultural, social, and economic event, the Super Bowl. And in 2011, 111 million people, that's 111, watched the Super Bowl, making it the most viewed television program in U.S. history. American football, unlike European football, or soccer as we call it, is a violent, militaristic game. And the gist, two teams of 11 muscular, manly men in plastic armor pummel each other in helmets and face masks, pummel each other into oblivion as they march up and down the field, capturing territory while trying to penetrate each other's end zones, which is why all women should watch this game. The game rose with the military-industrial society it represents. American football surpassed the gentler sport of baseball as America's national pastime during the post-World War II years as U.S. imperial expansion continued. Normally, the Super Bowl, with its ritual militarized violence and crass, tasteless, often downright perverse advertisements, although if you think that, you need to watch, Family Guy sometime, represents American culture, at its worst and at its best. But this year's Super Bowl, I think it's best sometimes. When you just have a minute of a monkey dancing up and down, if it's got a monkey in it, it's funny. Anyway, this year's Super Bowl, scheduled for February 2nd in New York in an open stadium in a blizzard where it's probably going to be 10 below, will have one redeeming feature. It will put the national spotlight on the rise of the 9/11 truth movement. Yep. The Seattle Seahawks, who will be playing the Denver Broncos for the championship, are coached by a 9/11 truther, Pete Carroll. This fact has already begun to astonish the middle-brow world of mainstream American football audiences. It's probably why you haven't seen so much of Pete Carroll in the mainstream media as well. But the sports blogosphere is already spilling over with outraged headlines. Is Seahawks coach Pete Carroll a 9/11 truther? Isn't it weird that only the media can bash somebody about being a, quote, truther? In other words, somebody that wants to know the truth about something, as opposed to my saying is a 9/11 liar, like everybody in the media. So, report, Pete Carroll may be a 9/11 truther. Pete Carroll thinks truth about 9/11 from a 4-star general. Pete Carroll, 9/11 conspiracy theorist? Wah! So here's the deal. What did Pete Carroll do to achieve such notoriety? Last spring, Carroll grilled 4-star general Peter Chiarelli. Now, and I'll explain to you what exactly happened. He was asked, actually, and this was some time ago, he had a relationship with the military. I did not agree with this, by the way. He had a relationship with the military where, because he's so good at building family, esprit de corps, doing things better than they've ever been done, he's taken a lot of the philosophy of Tim Galway from his book of The Game of Inner Tennis, by the way, and taken that to a level where he's taken the youngest team actually in the NFL, one of the worst paid, I might add. Russell Wilson is barely scraping at $600,000, as opposed to the $1 million contracts of Flacco and both the Manning brothers. But he had this general had just retired as the U.S. Army's vice chief of staff, and Pete has access to a lot of people. I mean, for goodness sakes, he has access to billionaire Paul Allen, Gates, Steve Ballmer. But Carroll expressed skepticism about whether an airliner really hit the Pentagon, and apparently also remarked on the obvious controlled demolition of World Trade Center Building 7 and the only slightly less obvious explosive demolitions of both the Twin Towers. Quote, every 9/11 conspiracy theory you can think of, Pete Carroll asked about, said Ricky Ellison, who's an ex-football player, also a USC guy as well, turned military advocate who was present at the meeting. General Chiarelli was understandably annoyed by Carroll's questions. Remember, all he was asking was questions. Another thing that Pete loves is that he's a huge YouTube fan, and he downloads a lot of stuff on YouTube, loves YouTube. Matter of fact, when we were in Egypt together, he was like, oh, well, look at this YouTube thing, and look at that. He's always downloading YouTube. He's a very online creature. So this general obviously could not publicly deviate from the official mainstream media government propaganda storyline of 9/11 without endangering his career. and perhaps his life. And Pete also went in because he was, as I said, he was training Navy SEALs and was trying to get them to be better than they ever could be. And, I said, really, do you really want to teach these techniques that you know about human performance to, I don't know, a bunch of killers? So Carroll was basically forcing Chiarelli to lie by confronting Chiarelli about the all-too-obvious 9/11 inside job. Let me also point out that when you're talking about the collapse of WTC-7 and the Solomon Brothers building, which was part of the scenario and probably the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, that airplane was supposed to crash into that building so that they could then trigger it. And when something went wrong with that airplane, somebody on the inside just went, fook it, blow the building up. Who's going to know? We've got everybody baffled already. And the entire 9/11 report deals with the collapse of WTC-7 by not mentioning it at all. It might as well not have existed. And you have a mayor saying, we pulled the building. You have Larry Silverstein, the owner, saying, quote, we demoed the building. You have the head of the fire department saying, quote, the building was demoed. And if you understand that it takes months of painstaking work to plant charges in such a way to implode a building, it can't be done in 4 hours, so they tell us. And the entire building implodes perfectly. Oh, and there just so happened to be tons of gold underneath the building that disappeared. So the biggest barrel of political dynamite in U.S. history, Pete Carroll, became an honorary member of We Are Change, which is an activist group that specializes in guerrilla video interviews with suspected 9/11 cover-up criminals and traitors. And what Carroll did to Chiarelli was exactly what We Are Change members repeatedly did to Rudy Giuliani when the former New York mayor was running for president. Everywhere Giuliani went, he was met by We Are Change activists with video cameras asking, since you have admitted that you knew in advance that the Twin Towers were going to collapse, why didn't you warn the firefighters that were inside? Because those brave 9/11 truth activists changed history by forcing Rudy Giuliani to drop his presidential bid. Because without them, we'd probably already have been led into World War III by President Giuliani. And Pete Carroll is not the only American football celebrity who has championed 9/11 truth. Another patriotic athlete is Mark Stepanowski, and he first spoke out for 9/11 truth back in 2007. And Carroll and Stepanowski are presumably just the tip of the iceberg, because it seems likely that the majority of NFL players know, or at least suspect, that 9/11 was an inside job. And though this may seem counterintuitive, since athletes are stereotyped as being, big, dumb, stupid, and authoritarian, the reality is that NFL players have to be smart, capable, they all have college degrees, and they're capable of thinking for themselves to rise to the professional level. You don't become the best of the best by being an idiot. So the fact that most NFL players are African American also contributes to the likelihood that many and by the way, very spiritual as well, contributes to the 9/11 truth movement, because polls have shown that roughly 1/3 of Americans, 36%, in a well-known Scripps poll, think it likely that 9/11 was an inside job. And in the African American community, which understands the evil that the U.S. government is capable of because they have been the victim of it historically, the figure is much higher. It's well over 60%. So by coming out publicly for 9/11 truth, Pete Carroll has joined some of America's most popular celebrities: Willie Nelson, Harry Belafonte, Mos Def, Eminem, Jadakiss, Immortal Technique, Henry Rollins, Richie Havens, Peter Coyote, Ed Asner, Charlie Sheen, Martin Sheen, Roseanne Barr, Sharon Stone, Michael Moore. Well, not so much Michael Moore. He still thinks the Saudi Arabians did it. And two of America's most critically acclaimed filmmakers, David Lynch and Richard Linklater, all of whom are among the thousands of notables and experts listed at patriotsquestion911.com. So Pete Carroll's reputation as a fearless 9/11 truth seeker will be the talk of many an American dinner table at Super Bowl 47 as it approaches. Now, could this be a reason for them to rig the game against Pete Carroll and the Seahawks? Is he too dangerous to be, quote, the reigning Super Bowl champion coach? Be very interesting to see what happens with will they move the Super Bowl to someplace else because of a storm? But as the blogospheres drive the topic into public consciousness, the mainstream media is going to be forced to cover the issue because it's happening in New York. And remember, Pete Carroll used to coach the New York Jets, so he's really returning home. And when he was fired by the New York Jets, he claimed, the owner of the New York Jets, he said it was like looking into the face of the devil. He said it was the greatest day of his life when they fired him from the Jets, because they said, oh, you're too nice a guy to coach pro football. But Carroll will be too busy preparing for the big game to allow all this talk to distract him. But when more than 100 million Americans sit down to watch Pete Carroll's Seattle Seahawks play the Broncos, the 9/11 truth issue is going to be on many people's minds. So rest assured, no marching band will reenact the controlled demolition of Building 7 during halftime. Oh, well, unless it was Stanford, I guess. Nor will Mos Def, Eminem, Immortal Technique, Jadakiss rap Bush knocked down the towers. Though such a halftime show would be scandalously more memorable than Janet Jackson's Bazoom wardrobe malfunction. And if Seattle wins, don't expect Coach Carroll to scream out live on Fox TV, "This one's for the truthers."